My wife texted from her girls' trip. "Having so much fun in Miami. Wish you were here," I replied. "Glad you're enjoying the hotel. The $4,850 charge for the couple's spa package just cleared our joint account. My lawyer has the receipt." Her next call wasn't a text. It was from her work husband's CEO, begging me. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I did not pace the kitchen or put my fist through drywall or do any of the things you picture yourself doing in a moment like that. I just sat at the kitchen table under the overhead light that always buzzed slightly when it was cold, stared at the banking alert on my phone, and read the words a second time. Slowly. The way you read a contract clause when you suspect someone has buried something in it and you want to make absolutely sure you are right. Couples spa package, oceanfront experience, complimentary champagne on arrival, not girls' trip, not networking retreat, not the loosely defined conference that had supposedly required her to pack that blue silk blouse, the good perfume, and every piece of swimwear she owned. Couples. The word sat there in plain digital type like it had been waiting its whole life to be read by exactly the wrong person. She had left 3 nights earlier on a Thursday. I had carried her bag to the rideshare because that is the kind of husband I was. She was wearing that blue silk blouse she had stopped wearing around me sometime around the previous spring, and she had a particular brightness in her eyes that I had told myself was professional excitement. A work trip, a chance to reconnect with clients. She kissed me on the cheek on her way out the door, and the kiss felt like punctuation. Not a comma, not even a period, an dash, the kind that signals the sentence is already over and whatever follows is just administrative. I had gone back inside and sat down at the kitchen table with my tax documents and my mileage spreadsheet and a bowl of leftover chili I had not bothered to reheat. The chili had gone vaguely gelatinous at the edges. The overhead light was buzzing. That was my Tuesday evening. Hers, apparently, cost $4,850 of our shared money. Her text arrived 5 minutes after the charge cleared. The timing was almost impressive in its casualness, the way a card player might flip their hand before you have even finished counting your chips. "Having so much fun in Miami. Wish you were here." With a little sun emoji. She had used a sun emoji. I set my spoon down on the placemat. I looked at the text. I looked at the banking notification. I looked back at the text. Then I typed one sentence and hit send. No follow-up message. No question mark. No exclamation point. No cruelty. Just a single fact delivered at room temperature, the way a compliance document gets delivered, the way a subpoena gets delivered, without drama and without apology, because neither one is necessary when the facts speak loudly enough on their own. Glad you are enjoying the hotel. The $4,850 charge for the couple's spa package just cleared our joint account. My lawyer has the receipt. I put the phone face down on the table. Then I got up, walked to the hallway, opened the filing cabinet, pulled out the 3rd drawer, and found the manila folder I had not touched in over a year. The label was in my own handwriting, blocky and utilitarian, the way I labeled everything. Clause 14. Corporate conduct. I stood there with the folder in my hands for a moment before I opened it. The kitchen light buzzed. Outside, a car drove slowly past. Normal Tuesday sounds for a normal Tuesday that had quietly turned into something else entirely. 3 years earlier, she had slid a document across this same table on a Sunday afternoon with that particular sheepish smile she deployed when she wanted something and knew she was going to get it. She had been sitting on the kitchen stool with her bare feet tucked under her, a glass of Cabernet balanced on her knee, her hair still damp from the shower. "Babe," she had said, "can you just read this? It is the company code of conduct. I am the ethics liaison, and I am completely drowning, and you are so good at this stuff. You will see things I miss." She was right about that. I spent 11 years as a federal contracts consultant. My entire professional identity was built on reading documents that other people found tedious and finding the one sentence, the one subclause, the one procedural gap that everyone else had glossed over. I took the document from her, got a pen, and spent 4 hours on it while she watched television in the other room. I redlined inconsistencies. I tightened the definitions. I restructured 2 sections that were internally contradictory and somewhere around page 12, in a section covering employee conduct during company-sponsored travel and corporate card expenditures, I added a clause. It was not malicious. I want to be clear about that. I was not thinking about her and some future version of events I could not have imagined at the time. I added it because the existing language had a gap. The document prohibited romantic involvement between employees on company time in the office, but said nothing about company-sponsored off-site events, which meant anyone with a corporate card and a hotel booking could technically argue they were in a gray area. The clause I added closed that gap. Romantic involvement between employees during corporate-sponsored travel, combined with documented misuse of corporate or shared expense resources, would trigger an automatic ethics investigation and constitute immediate grounds for dismissal where expense abuse was evident. She had read it over my shoulder when I walked her through the changes, and when she got to that clause, she had laughed. Actually laughed, the way she used to laugh before things got quiet between us. "God, you are such a buzzkill," she said. "No one is sleeping with anyone. This is not Mad Men." I highlighted the clause in yellow and told her it was a liability gap that needed closing. She initialed it in the track changes column and typed a margin comment right next to the highlight. A small laughing emoji followed by 4 words. "Let us hope this never happens." She submitted the document to the board the following Monday. It was ratified. It became policy. That was 3 years ago. Now her name was sitting in the direct center of the very framework she had approved and initialed, and once giggled about over a glass of Cabernet, and the margin comment she had left was still visible in the version I had saved. I read through my own notes in the folder, the way you sometimes reread something you wrote a long time ago, and feel a strange distance from it, like it was written by a version of you who knew something you did not. Then I called someone I had not spoken to in just over 2 years. His name was Colin Reeves. We had worked together briefly on a Department of Defense procurement audit in the mid-2000s, back when I still did that work full-time. He had moved into private sector compliance after that, and had eventually landed as the chief compliance officer at a mid-size financial advisory firm. Her boyfriend's firm, as it happened. A man named Marcus Hale, who had been her colleague, then her lunch companion, then her conference travel companion, and who she referred to around the house as her work husband in a tone that was always slightly too comfortable. Colin picked up on the 3rd ring. He did not say hello. He just said, "How bad is it?" That told me something. It told me that Colin had already been watching, that whatever I was holding in my hand was not a surprise to the people inside that company so much as a confirmation of a suspicion that had been circling for some time. Compliance officers develop a particular radar for these things. You cannot spend years auditing expense reports without learning what certain patterns look like. I told him about the spa receipt. $4,850 charged to our joint account, the couples package, the champagne, the oceanfront suite upgrade that had been itemized in the hotel confirmation I had found, forwarded to a secondary email address she did not know I could access. I told him about the time-stamped photo. She had posted it to a private story at 7:43 in the evening, Miami time. Her feet in his lap on a resort lounger, his hand curled around a champagne flute, the horizon going orange and pink behind them over the water, and the corner of the room key card just barely visible on the side table from our joint card account. Then I told him about the second receipt. 3 weeks before the trip, there was a dinner charge on the company corporate card, $1,200 at a private dining room at a restaurant in the financial district, filed under new account prospecting, 2 guests listed, no client name on the entertainment log. I had checked the CRM records, which I had access to because she had once asked me to help her pull a report and had never revoked my login credentials. The supposed prospective client associated with that billing code had not had any active business with the firm in 14 months. The line was very quiet. I could hear Colin breathing. I could hear, faintly, the sound of his chair shifting. When he spoke again, his voice had a different texture. Tighter, more precise. The voice a man uses when he is no longer having a conversation and is instead beginning a process. "Send me everything," he said. I sent the receipts. I sent the screenshots. I sent the photo. I sent a PDF of the ethics policy with her initials still visible in the track changes column, her margin comment still sitting there in the document metadata like a small ironic timestamp, the laughing emoji, the 4 words, the date she had typed them. Colin called back in 20 minutes. His voice had changed again, this time into something almost clinical. "Legal does not like how clean this is," he said. "There is genuinely no wiggle room here. The policy language is airtight, the expense documentation is direct, and the personal use of a shared financial account to fund an undisclosed romantic engagement during company-adjacent travel creates a separate liability thread entirely." He paused. "How did you get the language this clean?" "I know," I told him. "That is why I wrote it that way." Another pause. Longer this time. Then he said he would be filing the compliance report within the hour. She was still posting from the pool bar. I know this because she sent a second text while I was on the phone with Colin, a photo of a frozen drink with a little umbrella in it, and a caption that said, "Living her best life." I did not respond to that one. I was busy. The compliance report landed on the CEO's desk at approximately 9:15 that evening. His name was Richard Foss. I did not know him personally, had never met him, had only seen his face in the small circular headshot on the company LinkedIn page, gray-templed and professionally neutral. At 9:52, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize, a 212 area code, and when I picked up, Richard Fossey introduced himself in the careful voice of a man who has just watched a very expensive problem materialize out of a clear sky. He started professionally. He wanted to understand the situation. He wanted to make sure there had been no misunderstanding. He used the phrase, misunderstanding, 3 times in the first 90 seconds, each time with slightly less conviction than the last. The way a person tests ice and keeps testing it even as they feel it shifting underfoot. I let him talk. I am good at letting people talk. You learn that in federal contracting work. You let the other side exhaust their framing before you say a single word because everything they say tells you exactly what they are afraid of and what they are prepared to offer. What Richard Fossey was afraid of, it became clear, was not the personal situation. He was not calling to defend Marcus Hale's character or to minimize what had happened in that Miami hotel suite. He was calling because the expense report chain created a direct liability exposure for the firm. The dinner 3 weeks earlier, filed under prospecting for a dormant client, was not just an ethics policy violation. It was a falsified business expense. That was a different category of problem. That was the kind of problem that showed up in audits, the kind that regulators noticed, the kind that, depending on how many similar entries existed in the expense history, which Colin had already begun pulling, could constitute a pattern of financial misrepresentation. Richard Fossey was not begging me to forgive my wife. He was begging me to contain the documentation. I let him finish. Then I told him 3 things, quietly and without any particular emotion, the way you deliver findings in a compliance debrief. First, the documentation had already been filed with Colin Reeves in his official capacity and was now part of a formal internal record that neither Richard Foss nor I could unilaterally retract. Second, my attorney had received copies of all materials the previous evening, which was true because I had called her before I called Colin, a woman named Sandra Park who had represented me once before and who had responded to my late evening email with a 2-word reply. I see. Third, the scope of any further escalation was entirely dependent on how the firm chose to proceed in the next 48 hours, and that I had no personal interest in destroying an institution over the conduct of 2 individuals, provided the institution demonstrated that it took its own stated policies seriously. Richard Fossey was quiet for a very long time. I listened to the silence. Outside, a dog was barking somewhere down the street. The kitchen light had finally stopped buzzing. Then he asked me what I wanted. I told him I wanted 3 things. I wanted a formal ethics finding consistent with the policy language, applied without exception. I wanted the falsified expense entries reviewed by an independent auditor, the scope and timeline to be determined by Colin's office and not by the firm's internal preference. And I wanted a written acknowledgement from the firm's legal department that the personal financial damages, specifically the $4,850 charged to our joint account, would be reimbursed directly and in full within 10 business days, given that the expenditure was made in the context of a documented ethics violation involving a firm employee. He agreed to all 3 before we hung up. Marcus Hale resigned 4 days later. The firm issued his resignation as a mutual separation for personal reasons, which is the sentence corporations use when they need to preserve the appearance of dignity while removing the source of a legal exposure. The independent audit of his expense history over the preceding 18 months turned up 11 additional entries with documentation irregularities totaling just over $22,000. I was not involved in what happened after that. That was Colin's work and Sandra's and Richard Fosse's, people doing the jobs they were built to do. My wife called me from the airport on the morning she flew home. She did not sound like someone returning from a vacation. She sounded like someone who had been awake for most of the night, which she had been, because Marcus had called her after Richard Fosse called me, and she had spent the hours between midnight and dawn understanding, piece by piece, exactly how much I had known and exactly how long I had been patient about knowing it. She asked me how I had the ethics policy language. I told her she had asked me to write it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me about the margin comment, the laughing emoji, the 4 words. I told her I had saved the document file and that the metadata was timestamped and that yes, her initials were still in the track changes column right next to it. She said she did not know what to say. I told her she did not have to say anything right now. I told her I had contacted Sandra Park and that the paperwork was already in process and that I had moved my portion of the joint account funds to a separate account the morning after the banking alert, which Sandra had advised and which was entirely within my rights. I told her the house would be handled fairly and that I was not interested in punishing anyone beyond what the situation had already delivered on its own. There is a particular kind of grief that is not loud. It does not announce itself. It sits in the kitchen under a slightly buzzing light and sorts tax documents and eats cold chili and reads policy language from a folder in the 3rd drawer of a filing cabinet. It waits. It reads carefully. It does the work that nobody else bothered to do. Some years earlier, a woman had tucked her feet under her on a kitchen stool and handed me a document and said, "You are so good at this stuff." She had been right about that. She had been right about that the whole time. The reimbursement cleared on the 9th business day. The buzzing in the kitchen light turned out to be a loose wire. I fixed it on a Wednesday afternoon while the house was very quiet, and the sun was coming in flat and even through the windows, and when I turned the light back on, it burned clean and steady and did not make a sound.